Welcome to the Sanity Project podcast, the place for internet technology professionals whose work-life balance plan has imploded. We are here to provide solutions that will help the IT pro live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. Here's your host, Joanne Victoria.
Hi, I'm Joanne Victoria, the I Know What Works coach, and I am the host of the Sanity Project podcast. I partner with IT professionals in telecommunications, technology, entertainment, and mass media industries. I'm fortunate to have experts in the areas of leadership, anxiety, relationships, and anything that will help the IT pro and the others who listen to the show live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. Our guest today is Nathan Segal. Nathan Segal is a spiritual practitioner who has studied the teachings of Byron Katie, Eckhart Tolle, Adyashanti, Stephan Bodian, Neuro Linguistic Programming, NLP, for those of you who know, the work of Grant McFetridge, and others. When working with clients, Nathan's purpose is to find limiting beliefs through careful questioning, then to help the client find their freedom from those beliefs. What Nathan is going to help us solve today is how people can overcome self-sabotage and dissociative amnesia. Welcome to the show, Nathan Segal.
Thank you so much.
So, self-sabotage is prevalent. It just goes on day after day with person after person. And dissociative amnesia, I think that might need explaining a bit to our audience. But could you talk about these two issues and how they relate to each other and how you help your clients work through these issues?
Sure. Well, in my experience, the self-sabotage and dissociative amnesia, they have a tendency to go together. And where I first encountered it was in my own life, and many times, not just once. But my earliest memory of it was when I was 10 years old. And I was giving a report to my grade 5 class, and it was on the topic of amoebas. Now, they didn't like that. It didn't go over well at all. They called me a liar. They told me I was stupid. They said I made it up. And the teacher didn't do anything to stop it. And the shock of all these kids screaming at me was more than I could stand. And I internalized the negative belief or self-sabotaging belief that I'm stupid. And the shock created dissociative amnesia. And what happened when that event took place, I forgot that I'd been traumatized. I developed the belief that I'm stupid. I failed my way through school for 13 years. And I didn't come out of it until I was in my early 20s. Now, the reason I came out of it was I was in a technical school. I was studying aircraft maintenance engineering. I was doing relatively well. And one day I was standing in the locker room, and I remember thinking that I was doing well. And then I thought, where did I ever get the idea that I was stupid? And then all the memories of what happened to me in grade 5 flooded my mind. And it lived in my mind for a few seconds, and it dissolved. And after that, my marks took off. But the whole thing was self-sabotage and dissociative amnesia. Unfortunately, that became a pattern in my life, and it repeated in many ways over the years with various sorts of trauma. So self-sabotage, in my experience, is a result of some sort of shock or trauma. It's not in my experience, it's not the result of like a physical injury. And in terms of the dissociative amnesia, the dissociative amnesia is a form of amnesia, but it's not caused by a medical injury or some sort of physical problem. Again, it's caused by a shock, some sort of trauma. And in my experience, the self-sabotage and dissociative amnesia have a tendency to go together. It's like one happens and the other almost instantaneously happens after that. And so my task, what I finally realized about 5 years ago, is like, I'm really sick of this. Because what I was having is what I refer to as a knee-jerk reaction. I'd have a shock, they would trigger the dissociative amnesia and self-sabotage all at once. And it seemed like they were happening together, but they weren't. They would happen so quickly that it seemed like all at once. But when I finally realized I need to change my behavior, I got to stop this from happening. And when I became aware of it, what I did is I started to change my behavior so that when a shock would happen, in the form of a nasty email, a phone call, or some sort of confrontation, what I would immediately do is create space. So if somebody sent me a nasty message online or left a nasty message on my phone, I would literally get up and walk away. I would not engage in the knee-jerk reaction, because the knee-jerk reaction would inevitably create more problems for me. And so by creating that space, I gave myself the ability to feel what was happening, like to feel the shock, and to let it be in my body and not to do anything with it, not to tell a story about it. The other problem is with that kind of thing, you get a severe shock to do with the self-sabotage and the dissociative amnesia. If you don't hold the energy in your body, if you don't train yourself to do it, the tendency is to try to escape. And if you escape in your mind, that triggers the amnesia. And so the real challenge for me was to start creating that space. And when I created that space, I would allow myself to feel the shock fully without reacting. And I would not come back to the source of it for an hour, few hours, a day, 2 days. I wouldn't come back until I could sit down and listen to or look at or whatever it is to do with the message without having a severe reaction. If I had a reaction again, get up and leave again, until such time as I could just sit down and be with what happened. And when I could be with what happened, then I was ready to come from a different place, which is a place of resilience and response and resourcefulness. And I could marshal all the intelligence and knowledge that I had to be able to come from a place of response rather than reactivity. And so that was a huge thing.
That happens to so many people,
Yeah.
where they are shocked from the bullying. That's a great label, the self-sabotage. And they can be, you were there, for 13 years in that space that you weren't even aware of?
Yeah.
And yet others go through the same thing. And it must take, it could take a long time to get to the source of what this is, especially with the dissociative amnesia. I mean, when you're talking, the back of my mind is going, aha, 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 that this is now making sense for me regarding my children, regarding myself, and obviously other people that I know and have worked with and I'm working with now. But this is a brilliant observation.
Thank you.
I mean, seriously, it's like when people are in trauma, they might go to panic. They start panicking and have panic attacks. And what that does, it's hiding the self-sabotage and the dissociative amnesia, because there's no way for them to be aware that they have to resource what's going on, find out what's going on, and then, well, what I do is when certain things like that happen is I put them in a box. And then I might let the box go up to the heavens or burn or do something that it goes away. But you're saying to just handle it using your own soul and brain.
Yeah, well, there's an aspect of this that I haven't mentioned. Where I first started learning the technique of how to deal with shocks, it came from Eckhart Tolle and the power of now. And one of the things that he was talking about is how we create our own suffering. But more than that, he was talking about when pain happens, emotional pain happens, do not allow your mind to tell a story about it, to just feel it. So a concrete example is many years ago here in Mexico, I received some really bad news. It created a severe shock in my body. And it was like somebody punched me in the gut that left their fist there. And I could barely move, I could barely breathe, and I did one thing I'd never done before. I sat down in my chair, and I just felt it, without a story, without self-pity, without any of that kind of stuff. And I just sat there, and I felt it, and I didn't do anything else. And after about 5 minutes, I noticed it started to lessen. It started to, I got this sense of it fraying around the edges and softening, and eventually it went away completely. And I was able to get up and go around my business as if it had never happened. But it came back again. When it came back again, I knew what to do, how to deal with it. But Eckhart is saying, you've got to sit with this, because if you run away mentally, it's going to come back as bad or even worse.
My experience of people who deal like that, who invite it back actually, by dwelling on it and creating a story around it and creating several stories during their life where they have, issues, and, there's a detailed self-sabotage. I've seen it. And they want to explain it away, and it's not explainable in our world, because people are not willing to cop to the fact that they create their own suffering.
Yeah, there are lots of things going on with the self-sabotage too. I mean, in terms of working with somebody to try and figure out what's going on, I ask them a lot of questions, very careful questions, to try and find out what either one or more limiting beliefs are. And once I know what those are, then I can work with the person. And so depending on what they say, I might use the work of Byron Katie as a way of doing it. I might use something from NLP called timeline therapy. I might use something called parts integration, where you're dealing with conflict, internal conflict. So you've got two parts at war with each other. So in dealing with that. And sometimes it's like this one client I had, he was telling me this stuff, and I said to him, because we had worked together for a while, and I said to him, I need to bust you on this. And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, this thing that you've come up with, this belief, this thought that you've come up with, you haven't checked it out with the person that you say is responsible, have you? He said, no. I said, so what you've done is you've created this enormous house of beliefs and ideas and condemnations and anger and everything else, but you've never gone to the person who you say is responsible for it to find out if this one root belief is true or not. And
wow.
It shocked him. And he suddenly realized that what I was saying to him was true. And it was a huge realization for him. He didn't realize that that's what he was doing, but that's, so many of us, when we suffer a trauma, we create all these stories, and unless there's a way of examining our stories to see if they're true or not, we quite often create mountains.
I have a Post-it right here on my computer. It says, what if that wasn't true?
Yeah, exactly, which is what Byron Katie says.
Yes.
Exactly, What if it's not true?
What if it's not true? And then people wind up, I'm right. People stick to their stories, and what if it's not true?
Yeah, exactly. And there was a combination of a shock and a revelation for me. Just kind of looked at me and, sorry, I've got a dog problem here. Let me close my door. Give me a sec. Sorry about that.
Yep.
Anyway, so there's that, but then there's the dissociative amnesia side of things when that kicks in, or if it kicks in. And when I first started to find my way out of it, outside of what happened to me when I was 10, there's something that happened again here. I'm in Mexico. I'm looking at a site, a combination like videos created by a guy by the name of Robert Smith. Yeah, that's really his name. And he created Faster Emotional Freedom Technique. And one night I was looking at a video, and it was about amnesia.
Wow.
Yeah, and he wasn't using EFT on that. He just gave an explanation. He said, amnesia leaves clues in the form of feelings in the body. I'd never heard that before. And I remember thinking, wow, that's interesting. And the next day I was at a farmer's market, and I was thinking about an event of amnesia that I suffered. In this case, I was aware of it. Like over time, I developed the ability to realize when I was suffering from it, but not necessarily to get back into the memories. Anyway, I was at a farmer's market. I was walking around, and I was thinking about what happened the night before and noticing the feelings in my body. And as I did, a question came to mind that I'd never thought of. And when that question came up, it was like it turned around inside my mind, looked behind what seemed to be a dark wall, and all the memories were there, and I remembered everything. And it literally took seconds, and everything fell away, and all these problems just suddenly vanished, and some doors started opening again in my life. So that was one thing. And then there were two other techniques I learned about for recovering from amnesia. And one of them is called timeline therapy, which I mentioned earlier. That's part of Neuro Linguistic Programming. And the other one is hypnosis. And I don't really know hypnosis all that well, except for what they call conversational hypnosis. I was trained by this guy I was working with. But the timeline therapy is extremely effective for resolving trauma and recovering memories like that.
Yeah, I experienced that myself many years ago when I lived in California. I lived in a place that was filled with all sorts of healers, all types of healers, and I went to a few NLP sessions with this guy, and he did use timeline therapy, and there were some good results. I don't remember all of the details, but I do remember being there with him and dealing with things that were happening or were actually things that had happened in the past, but we carry it inside our bodies. And I felt that to be, and I think he included some sort of hypnosis as part of the session, but not a theatrical style of hypnosis, but just something more like focus.
Yeah. Timeline does use hypnosis.
Yes. And I recall that feeling. I don't remember the details, but I have the sense still in my body because that comes back to my mind. So I think it was something big at the time, but I think I had carried it for a few decades. So, remnants might still be floating around in there. I'm not sure.
It could be. I mean, sometimes one session is enough. Sometimes you require a few.
Yeah, I think I went for at least 3. I'm not sure. At least 3. Because it was effective.
Yeah, it's very powerful.
Yes.
And when the things dissolve, one of the things that I noticed about it, some of the different things I did with my coach through this, is it's like they never happened. Or they happened a long time ago or to someone else. Mm-hmm. It's astonishing when some of the things just vanished from my life. It was like it was never there.
Well, it wasn't until you created it, right?
Yeah, the creation of some of these things for many people, of course, is unconscious. They simply don't know. And what timeline does is it speaks to the mind at the level of the unconscious and in its language. And when you do that, amazing changes can happen.
Okay, so tell me about your book, Life After Bullying, which for our listeners is available on Amazon in Kindle form as well as other forms. So you can go to Amazon and look for the title, Life After Bullying, or just Nathan Segal's name, Nathansegal, Segal, or go to Nathan's website at nathansegal.org.
Yeah.
So tell us about that book.
Well, it was meant to be the culmination of a journey to do with bullying, where I actually thought I had gotten over it and had put it behind me, but that wasn't actually the case. But what the book contains is all these things that I learned about bullying through my lifetime, all these observations, and it's all about adult bullying, just to be specific, not in general. And there were a lot of things I learned, and one of them is, since I was bullied a lot as a child, if I could go back in time, what I would have said to my parents, I want to take classes in Krav Maga, which is an Israeli martial art.
Right.
It's designed for disabling people. And because if I'd learned how to fight when I was a kid, things would have changed dramatically. But they didn't. And as an adult, I had to learn all these techniques of how to protect myself. One of the things I learned about bullying is that, and I didn't want to believe it when somebody told me this until I went through all that coaching. And when I found out that the bullying creates an energy inside you. It creates a lot of pain, and it creates a kind of energy signature which unfortunately attracts more bullies. And when I went through it and was able to dissolve these things with NLP, those situations stopped happening in my life. But beyond that, in the book, it's like the mindset of bullies, how bullies function in the world, things that they do to maintain power. So like if you're at the point of unmasking a bully and exposing them for who they are, one of the things they'll do is flip on you and play the role of the victim and accuse you as the victim of being the bully. And if you get angry, which they're counting on, then they can make it and point the finger at you. See, I told you he was unstable. I told you he was mental. And if you've ever never been exposed to it, it's extremely infuriating.
Would you say that, I'm sorry, but would you say that bullies are manipulators as well?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. In every way under the sun. Like one of the things that I know for a certainty about bullies is they will take any perceived slight, real or imagined, and use it as a weapon against you.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if they don't have a slight, they'll make it up.
They'll make it up, and they'll make you believe it, too, if you're not conscious about yourself, if you don't have your own self-awareness.
Yeah, they'll try and make you believe it. I had this one bully that I was dealing with quite a bit, but I ultimately discovered that there was only one way to stop it, and that was to walk away.
Yeah, because, manipulators thrive on words. They thrive on their BS lines, and they always work. And people who are bullies don't always think they're bullies. They act the victim, as you say. But if you walk away from manipulator, and I've said that for years, oh, I'm being manipulated. Well, then just move. I mean, just get your body up and get away, because why would you want to suffer more pain? Again, you are the cause of your own suffering. Get away. But they thrive on language. They thrive on words because they like to twist your words.
Yes. But the other thing that happens with a lot of people is they want to beat the bully, which is one of the worst mistakes you can make. That's what they're counting on. And if you fall for that trap, as I did many a time, then you wind up stuck in this thing. Actually, one of the best things that ever happened to me, maybe about 8 or 9 months ago, is I was talking with a friend of mine in business, and the topic of narcissism came up. Mm-hmm. And I had avoided that like the plague. I didn't want to look at it, but one day I finally did. And when I looked at it, I realized that narcissism was a huge problem in my life. Not to do with me personally, thank God, but but people around me who were trying to manipulate me. And when I started to look, I started to learn a lot of stuff. But what my friend did is he tuned me into the videos of Ross Rosenberg. And when I watched those videos, all of a sudden, all the missing pieces, all the huge holes in my life suddenly were filled. I suddenly understood. Mm-hmm. I understood how I was being manipulated, but more importantly, I understood how I innocently made a mistake that led to falling into the trap. I saw how I trapped myself. I saw how I fell victim to the thing of needing to fight back, all this crap. And when I saw that, I realized that the only thing to do was to sever all ties permanently, no contact forever and ever. And it didn't matter what those people would do. No matter what they would throw at me over time, if it happened again, to just flat out ignore them and never engage in any way, and to maintain permanent silence no matter what happened. Because as far as I could see, it was the only way to stop it.
Well, also, they get bored if they don't have anybody to fight with.
Yeah, but the one thing I learned about bullies, another situation here in Mexico with a corrupt landlord who stole my damage deposit. Huh. When I fought back, the bugger was pursuing me with 3 lawyers in Mexico. Wow. And at one point, he created a document which he gave to the lawyer that I had. And when I looked at the document, it was full of fraud, full of extortion. And I knew that if I was dumb enough to sign it, he would do his best to put me in prison.
Wow.
So I walked away, and he screamed at me for 2 months by email, and then he quit. A year and a half later, he showed up again, filed a rip-off report against me, tried to drag me back into the fight. And I just looked at it, I thought, no way. And I just ignored him. And he went away, and I never heard from him again. But this is a tactic of bullies. If they don't have any victims to deal with in the moment, they'll try and create another situation from the past, which is what happened.
Yeah, they don't forget. That's what the other thing. They'll bring things that happened when they were 10. So what would you tell our audience if they had one thing to do today, if they could, I'm sure everybody has been bullied from one time to another by a good bully, a bad bully, very articulate, narcissistic bully, who I think are psychopaths anyway. That's the way I look at them. What can they do today?
Well, the number one thing is awareness. But beyond that, if you know you're in a situation like that, it would be a two-step process. The first would be setting boundaries. That's what I cover in extensive detail in my book. How to do it, what boundaries mean. I have scripts, the whole works, dealing with bullies in every walk of life. So that's the first step, setting boundaries, and see if they work. But if the bullies violate your boundaries repeatedly, they refuse to respect what you've done, then it's time to move to step 2, which is cutting the ties. I have scripts for that too. It's just having the courage to kick the bullies out of your life and never, ever, ever go back. Don't give in to any of their attempts to draw you back into the thing. Just flat out ignore them and stay as far away from them as you can. And if necessary, move. Quit your job.
That's it. People aren't willing to take all of the steps necessary. Well, I thank you for being here, Nathan Segal, nathansegal.org, Segal. You will see plenty of links on his page on my website at askjoannevictoria.com. There will also be a link to a download. Just look below, or if you're on the Facebook fan page, the Sanity Project podcast. And I would strongly suggest, as I do probably each and every podcast that I record, is that you re-listen to this, because I know you have missed things. I'm diligently listening and I've missed things. That's why I take some notes, but sometimes I miss things anyway. And don't forget to check out Nathan Segal's book, Life After Bullying, on Amazon. And I appreciate you being here today, Nathan Segal, and I appreciate the listeners as well. So stay tuned for the next episode, everyone, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Sanity Project podcast. Please go to AskJoanneVictoria.com and continue the conversation on my podcast page. And get a free copy of my book, The True Self Handbook, a guide to transform your life. That's AskJoanneVictoria.com. Take care, and thanks for being here.